Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this interviewing program. I'm Dylan Ryder from the Johnson County Library's Career and Finance Committee. We have the privilege to be joined by Efren Mojica from All About You Consulting. Efren is the founder and principal consultant of All About You Consulting and a 10-plus year partner and guest speaker with the Johnson County Library. Feel free to participate in our discussion by using the chat to add your comments and questions. Efren will attempt to address questions at various points throughout the presentation. And thank you all again. Here's Efren.
Thanks, Dylan. Hey, everybody. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining this evening. I always like to start out, give a shout out to the library, especially now. I mean, to put on a Zoom call in this day and age with everything going on with COVID, and so to keep informational presentations for the community going, I think is just tremendous. So real big shout out to them. I think when I gave Dylan my bio and a little bit of our write-up, it's actually now we're coming on 15 years. So I do want to call that out for the library and their partnership these almost 15 years. I've certainly enjoyed it. They've been great. If you are not familiar with their resources, check them out online, especially for those of you job hunting actively or even passively. They got a lot of great stuff, a lot of good presentations, presenters, so they're worth a look. So tonight we're going to talk on the art of interviewing. So this is actually one of three, actually now four presentations that I do for the library, the Johnson County Library over the years. I usually present at the location in Overland Park at 151st Street, but here with COVID and everything going on, we're going to be doing these Zoom, and instead of once a quarter, we're now doing something every month. So you get a chance to potentially listen and ask questions at the various presentations that I do throughout the year, and I don't even know what's coming up next, but I know it's on their site. So tonight, art of interviewing. The other ones, like I said, resumes is one, if that's of interest. That's actually the main one, how this all started. I have the art of interviewing, also have business networking. And then the last one, based on patron demand, is fundamentals and basics of LinkedIn. So those are coming down the road. I just like to mention those four topics because actually the last one, the fourth one, wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for your feedback. So I know the library certainly looks at feedback and what they want, what the patrons want to see, and that's how it came to be. So I was happy to put that together. So that's going to be coming in another month or two. So, like I said, today we're going to talk art of interviewing, a little bit more about me, a little bit about my background, and you can glance through this. And so, it's an interesting thing. Like, who really is an expert in interviewing? On one hand, you think, boy, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing, right? Who actually does so many interviews that they can go out here and educate, right? And so a little bit about how I came to be here and how All About You Consulting came to be. It actually started back in around 2003. I had just gotten out of the military. I like to tell people I'm a proud Navy veteran. Served 7 years as a naval officer. And last year of that, or actually last year and a half of that, teaching at my alma mater, the U.S. Naval Academy. Coming out of the military, I joined corporate America, and I was very fortunate to work with some executive placement firms that specialize in placing military officers with corporate America. They are the ones that actually gave me an appreciation for what a good resume is all about, and certainly the interviewing. I still benefit from that, even though that was a long time ago, and the preparation that's needed to successfully do and be part of an interview and set yourself apart from all the other candidates. And so yeah, that's how all this came to be. And back in mid 2000s, it launched into All About You Consulting at the nudging of a friend who said, "I can't believe you don't do this as a side business." In addition to that, I've actually been in the telecommunications industry for 20 years, been with Sprint for about 19 and a half, and now with T-Mobile. So telecommunications and technologies is my thing, and I really enjoy it. But I certainly enjoy this material that I bring to you here tonight as part of All About You Consulting. So on we go. Like I said, working back with those military recruiting firms, this is just a snapshot of the industries over the years that they had paired me with, and the companies down below are the ones I actually got offers with. Now, the reason I show this is because a lot of people think I've been in this industry for so long. How could I be successful in job hunting in other industries? Well, there is a lot of preparation certainly with interviewing, but the fundamental approach I would say is very similar. And so as you can see here, I didn't train specifically, and I wasn't taught specifically in how to interview with all these industries. But the approach that I was taught and what I'll be sharing with you tonight actually makes you will make you, I think, a very viable candidate in multiple industries. Because at the heart of it, how we portray ourselves to the hiring company, to the hiring manager, really is what increases our chances. Okay, so what I will share with you is really best practices, if you will, of things that I think will make you successful regardless of industry. Okay, so on we go. People come to me over the years, over the decades, and I have worked with every demographic you can think of. And I'm talking college students all the way to CEO level, and everybody in between, every educational background, every socioeconomic background. And often doesn't matter who they are, they'll come and say, "Hey, Efren, I need a job. What can you do for me? If you do my resume, will that help me get a job?" And this is where I really think this graphic here really shows what I think your approach should be for a successful job hunting. So the first thing I will say is you have to have an optimized resume. Now, it's not a matter of making sure you're updating it every month. That's not what it's about. It's really making sure that you've at least put some effort into it when especially when you think you're going to need it, right? I would say that if you haven't updated your resume in the last 6 months, it's something to really consider. Okay, it takes work. All right, and that's something that I've seen out of most of my clients that come to me, is that they haven't touched it in a long time. They haven't needed to. They've been in the same industry, the same company for so long, but you need to have that optimized resume, and you have to spend time on it now. The other part of it is really, and I think this is honestly the biggest and most important part, is the robust networking plan. And so what does that mean? So, what are you doing to leverage the people that the relationships you have, whether it's personal, whether it's in business, to help you in your job search? That should honestly be the first step, right? That you can work on the resume, you can work on the interviewing, but it definitely helps to have others in your network of people advocating for you, and helping you in your job search, or keeping their eye out, right? That's the best way to do it. I mean, I think we've all heard, and maybe some of you have benefited from it as well, where somebody said, "Hey, hey, Efren, there's a position that I caught wind of. I think you'd be great for it," and I put in a good word. I mean, how valuable is that, right? So you have to have that robust networking plan. That's actually part of a different presentation, but it is food for thought here, that if you haven't resurrected those, or established, or reinvigorated those contacts, you should. And then last but not least, what we're focusing on tonight is the interviewing. And all this together, these three circles, there's that little intersection where you come into play, and I think that is what's going to lead to successful job hunting. Okay, let's take a little bit of a quiz. All right, let's say, for some of you that have hired somebody to do some work at your house, right? It could be the bathroom, it could be the basement, whatever. And you certainly aren't just going to hire somebody without talking to them or evaluating them, right? So let's say you talk to the first person, all right? Maybe you found them on Craigslist, maybe you found them on the Value Pack, who knows? All right, so candidate one, company one, they come to you and you ask them, "Hey, I'm evaluating people to do work in my house," and this is what they tell you. I'll give you a minute to look at that. So, any thoughts on that person? And Dylan, we do have the chat up, right? If they want to submit an input.
Yes, we sure do.
Okay.
Nothing so far.
Okay. Yeah. So for those of you, you're looking at the candidate one. Does anybody have any initial impressions? Is this a great candidate? Is this somebody you would bring in? Any concerns? We'll take 10 seconds to see if anybody has any feedback.
Okay, we have one. Lowe's and Home Depot suggest they don't buy direct. We have another, not very specific on what they've actually done.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Another 5 seconds.
5 seconds, y'all. 4, 3, 2. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so that's good. That's very good feedback, right? Everybody, there's some concerns. I think the one that sounded that really rang a bell for me is the person that had questions on the details. So let's say you're interviewing the second company, and then they get on the phone, or you're meeting them in person, and they come out at you with this kind of information. So as you look through this, let's take another 10, 15 seconds. If anybody wants to put in the chat window your impressions of candidate 2 that comes to you with this level of information.
Okay, we have
Thoughts?
seems much more credible. We're seeing a lot of details here, aren't we?
Right. Yes. So very good. Anybody else? Last 5 seconds.
More outside references, much better,
Yep.
shares specific achievements.
Exactly. Everybody is correct. Everybody passed the quiz. And here's why I like to use this, because I think it's relatable, right? Everybody here has been in this situation hiring for somebody where you are, in essence, the hiring manager, right? And the funny thing is, when we go out there and we look for our own, apply for our own positions and trying to get a job, we sometimes forget what's important to us, right? It's going to be very much the same thing that would be important to a company, to a hiring manager, etc. And really, what that is the detail. The detail what candidate 2 is showing you here. And this is really the hardest thing for most people. A lot of people don't think in these terms. They don't know how to capture this or get to this level of information. So we're going to cover that material and how to get there in the upcoming slides. But like I said, thank you very much for your inputs and your observations. Everybody did pass the quiz. So what we're going to focus on tonight is really to understand the steps of the interview process, pre-interview preparations, post-interview, final touches. We want to position everybody here for job hunting success as much as we can in our 90 minutes. And then hopefully you can develop your interviewing strategy, which will hopefully lead to your key to success, and a lot of that stuff at the bottom right there. I can certainly use some of those, especially the 5,000 pack there. So we all want that. So agenda, we'll talk a little bit about observations, things that I've observed, things that recruiters that I know have observed, and also hiring managers. This presentation isn't just something, and all my presentations aren't just information that I come up with. I mean, I certainly will do my research in looking and reading and understanding what the current themes are with respect to resumes or interviewing, but and this is where I think it's more valuable. I tap into my network of recruiters and also all my hiring manager acquaintances of different levels in different industries, not just telecommunications, to ask them what they think, what their opinions are, right? I think that's it'll lead to a better, more well thought out and holistic approach to interviewing, and that I think is really going to be more advantageous for all of you. We'll also talk about pre-interview preparations. We'll hit some of the interview questions a little bit harder, and we'll close by going through some of the post-interview considerations. Okay. So what's the media saying? Yeah, if you do a little bit of a search on what are some of the opportunities of interviewees these days, what are some of the things that they're not doing well? Well, here's a summary from different news sites and agencies, consolidating it all into one. And so some of this might seem like common sense, but it's interesting to see that multiple agencies are reporting very similar things. Some very obvious stuff, talking down on your last employer, not showing enough energy, basic courtesies and manners. Who here practices shaking hands? Not a lot of people, right? You go in there, you're thinking you got your list of questions, but you don't practice the basic stuff, some of the nonverbals. How about the old school approach of thank you notes? Okay, people aren't doing that. Underdressing. Everybody thinks it's business casual. For some of you out there that are working from home, forget what that's like to put on business casual clothes, right? So people are forgetting some of the basics. Then there's always stuff like acting inappropriately, coming across too desperate, which is because of lack of practice, not being prepared, not being able to answer the right questions, the basic questions, and then just not being prepared for some of the things like the salary negotiation. So I think it's a pretty good list, and we're going to cover a bunch of this this evening. Okay, so what are some of the things that I have certainly seen? You know, I've been around the block here with interviewing. I actually have a position open currently in my company, and we'll be going through this yet again as far as hiring. And if I didn't mention it, yeah, I did mention 20 years in the telecom industry, now with T-Mobile. So some of the things that I've seen over the years, and they've been consistent. Okay, so some of the good people that are properly dressed, even those that are internal. Okay, you might be applying for a job within your own company. You know, I think showing up on jeans day to an interview in jeans doesn't quite do it. You want to show the interviewer, whether in your company or not, that you are taking this seriously. You can really never be accused of overdressing. Okay, so the people that came properly dressed, big thumbs up. I like multiple copies of the resume, because I might actually have other people there with me interviewing. So if you bring one copy of your resume, that's not going to do it. I like nice resume paper. And we're not talking about the 17-pound weighted paper that you get out of the office copier. We're talking about something in the high 20s or 32-pound. Maybe not necessarily cardstock, but something what you hand it to somebody, they're like, wow, okay, they can tell the difference. And you know what? Hiring managers do notice the difference. Any hiring manager actually knows that little bit of effort by good resume and going and printing it on good paper is a good thing. All right. I like the firm handshake. Being on time. You've always heard if you're late, it's almost a showstopper. Yes, I would agree with that. Real life examples of what the persons did, I certainly love that, especially when they're talking about experiences and results tied to the job that they're applying for. I like the thank you note, the email, or a thank you card. Certainly a good form to do. And then you also, a big one for me is watching the time of the answer, right? What you might have 30 minutes, you might have 60 minutes. It's not a good thing if you are monologuing and talking for 20 minutes on one answer and then you forget what you're trying to say. And that all takes practice. So what are some of the things that I thought were the bad or the opportunities? It's really the opposite of everything I just talked about, right? Lack of the details, not dressing up properly, talking down on the past on the past bosses or even the company. So all those can be fixed, right? When I ask my recruiter friends, and these are guys that's what they do for a living, and they are nationwide. I have a contact on the East Coast. She's president of her own recruiting firm. I have a CEO of a Overland Park-based recruiting firm who I know very well. They're family friends, and I certainly ask him for advice. And then some of the other ones I'm still close to that hire for the military, but still they are plugged into industry. What are they saying? So, a couple things. I think the biggest surprise to me was this tip number one. I thought it was dress and resume and answers and stuff like that. No, the biggest piece of advice they gave right now for interviewees, for all of you, is to ask smart questions and ask the right questions. Now, what exactly does that mean? I mean, does anybody want to venture a guess? Go ahead and put it. We'll take 10 seconds while I grab a quick drink here, and you can put it in the chat window. Why do you think asking the right questions, asking smart questions is so important? Anybody taking a guess? Dylan?
Not just, oh, we just had our first nibble. But I
Okay.
also wanted to say, if you would prefer to keep your questions private, feel free to message me directly, and we can go ahead and take those
Okay.
questions
Good
too.
point.
Comments. So we have one. The asking of questions that shows you're interested in the job or company and have done some research. We also have demonstrates curiosity.
Yep, spot on. That's exactly it. Right, and it's not it's got to be the right question. The reason I put the right questions, it's not about the me questions. The interview, especially the first one, is not the time to ask about do you get a company car or your vacation days or your bonus, right? That's not it. This is to whoever submitted that. You're right. This is a way for you to show that you've actually put yourself in this job and in this company, right? This is did you do research and you now understand that there is a competitive threat from company B that is launching a similar product or item, right? That might actually impact sales of this company you're applying for. But when you're asking questions like that, I mean, how can you not be wowed by that? It's very forward looking. It shows that you took the time, and it might even very clearly show you're trying to understand the impact of something like that in the job you're applying for. So yes, smart questions. You got to have them. You got to have a few. Tip number 2, dress appropriately. Enough said. We're going to go through some tips here in a couple slides. Follow job applications directions. So that came from my HR recruiter president, and her feedback there is really because people are going and rushing through, whether it's an online application, and I guess typically they are now, or one that you might be sent, leaving stuff out, and not typos and just things that you need to make sure in their required fields. Got to make sure you're following all of that. Okay. Tip number 4, applying for the right job. So what does that mean? Don't shotgun approach your job search. Now, hey, I respect if somebody's out there and you might be really pressing to have a job and finding a job soon. But what you don't want to do is apply for every single job that's out there, especially within a company. So let me give you an actual example of why that is very valid advice. I know when I was at Sprint and looking in the system, when a candidate applies for my job, I am actually able to see every other job they've applied for in the company. So when I see that somebody has applied for not just my job in project program management, but they've also applied for the marketing job, the finance job, and whatever else, that just shows me they don't want my job. They just want any job and hope to land. Okay, so there is a little bit of a drawback to applying for every job, and what that tells me too, there's nobody that's good at all that stuff. Okay, so that can come back to form a perception on you. Tip number 5, be nice to HR. Yeah, golden rule, right? Makes sense. Just because some people think, oh, it's just HR. I'm not talking to the hiring manager. Well, you know what? Oftentimes HR is the gatekeeper, so you want to make sure you're nice to everybody. Tip number 6, you want to close the interview properly. This is practicing how to recap why you're the right person for the job. And nothing wrong with the sales approach of a nice firm handshake at the end to reinforce why you are the best candidate. Number 7, be likable. You know, I know people go in there, and you've heard maybe some people go in very robotic into the interview process, and I certainly heard that coming out of the military, that some military people can do that. But when in actuality, you might actually be very funny, right? And you have this personality that other people like and have told you as much. So you want to be likable, right? You want to show people who you really are, show your true colors. But hey, you know what? You got to also understand that you're playing this game. Okay, I've seen enough candidates in in a live interview with a past VP. They let their guard down, and all of a sudden they were talking about all the partying days and stuff like that, and they totally tanked it. So you don't want to do that either. Okay, but you do want to be likable. Bottom line, show your personality when you can. Okay. Tip number 8, articulate the relevant examples of how you did in your job. I've talked to enough executives that we're hiring, and a lot of times people come in there and talk about how what they did in their job, but not how well they've done in their job. So you have to articulate the relevant examples, not just of what you've done, but how well you've done those things. Tip number 9, conveying the ability to work with, present to, and interact with executives. That's something I know even I've encouraged my current team to do, when they're capturing their annual accomplishments, right? Don't take for granted that it's part of your job to always work with the VP, the CEO, the CFO, right? It's easy to get into that feeling that everybody does it. No, not everybody does. So if you have the opportunity to say you work with a very unique individual group of people, maybe it's the executives, maybe it's the C-level, maybe it's the board, call that out. And then do your homework, not only on the company, but on certainly the position, the project, the department, what's going on, etc. That ties to asking the right question. Okay. And so then I went to what do the hiring managers say? So very similar to the stuff that I've already mentioned. No surprise, right? The nonverbals matter. Are they fidgeting? Do they smile? Do they have eye contact? Here's a big one. If there's more than one hiring manager, are they actually engaging everybody in the room? There will be times where, because of the way the layout is, or intentionally, you'll have interviewers sitting on opposite sides of the table, right? And if you're being asked a question in an interview, are you only focusing on the person in the middle and you're neglecting the people on the left and the right? You have to watch those things. Okay, we talked about handshake. Some of the other verbals, asking the right questions, sticking to the topic, making sure your answers are in a proper amount of time. You're not monologuing for 10, 15 minutes. You want to make sure that the interviewer can get their questions asked to you. Okay. Other things, we talked about the dress. Again, this is what hiring managers are saying could be done better. Not getting the thank you note, I touched on that earlier, does not hurt. You'll never be eliminated from a job because you wrote a thank you note. I've never heard that. So don't think that it's old school and nobody likes that anymore. You can mail it. You can certainly email it. That's acceptable these days. And if you're so inclined, I've seen people FedEx a thank you note to show that I really want this. Okay, so pull out all the stops basically, but you should send a thank you note. They don't like people that talk too much. I think one of my friends actually said, I once asked someone a question and she talked for 45 minutes. I'm not kidding. After 5 minutes, I gave up. And in the heat of the battle, in the heat of the interview, it's easy to get sidetracked because you're trying to articulate everything on your resume. And before you know, it's 45 minutes is up. Okay. It does take practice to not cut off the interviewer. Actually, I had that in an interview that I did maybe 2-3 months ago. I was ready to ask a question and they cut into it. They talked for 30 seconds. I said, well, what I was really trying to get at was bam. So they lost their 30 seconds. So don't let the interviewer finish the questions. And then certainly don't go out, feel like you need to defend why you've been laid off if the interviewer has not asked. Okay. So any questions? We'll do a quick pause there, give it 10 seconds, and see if anybody has any questions, comments, observations on what the recruiters and the hiring managers say.
Hey, yes, Efren, I have one here.
Mhm.
So you've mentioned, you've highlighted a couple times. What alternatives do you suggest, especially when we're talking about phone or some type of Zoom or other platform call? And then I have another question that oh well, actually another one. Just was thinking along the same lines. Any tips for Zoom interviews, hard to handshake or make eye contact effectively on this platform?
Excellent question. I think so. Just FYI, I haven't been into my Sprint campus, now T-Mobile campus office since March. And since then, I've had hired for one position and interviewed probably a dozen or so interns. So a very good question. I think first and foremost, yeah, you're not going to have the handshake. Okay, but you do have some certain advantages that you should capitalize on. So one, the easy one, make sure your connection's working. Right, if you know that you're sometimes spotty in the back room in the house, you know what, move closer to the router or wherever. You might even, and I did this for my son this week when he was doing a competition where internet was key, absolutely critical. We did a reboot of everything, his computer, the router, making sure there's nothing that could potentially derail from an internet standpoint. Okay, made sure the sound checks beforehand were done with the microphone, and in worst case, if something Murphy's Law shows up, he had a USB one ready to plug, just like I have one here ready to go if this headset battery this headset dies and the power cuts out. Okay, so that's some of the technology things. I think the other stuff is also to make sure that in an interview, there's no distractions. Some of those interns, actually, that joke, they kicked the roommates out, somebody else was watching their pet. Those kind of things are key, right? I think also doing a test, and I actually offered this. I offered them if they wanted to do a test with one of my team members, they can check lighting and all that stuff. Some hiring companies and managers won't let you do that, but you can certainly do that with a friend to make sure that the background looks good, the lens isn't dirty. Simple stuff, but very important stuff. And then I think more tactically, what you can do to prepare is you can actually have in that scenario your resume up, ready to go if you want to refer to things. Like I actually have my presentation notes in another screen here right next to me, right? So you can actually stack the deck in your favor by having this stuff here in front of you. You can actually take notes. The downside with that, and I ran into this with a couple of the interviewees, is the same stuff that I just talked about. They felt like they're reading from the screen here, and I can tell they're reading from the screen. They're not talking to me because there wasn't a person standing right in front of them. So they were reading to me and the other interviewers that were there joining on the conference call on this Skype for Business, actually. On that call, and it was very noticeable. All right, it sounded very robotic. I think some of the feedback that we gave those people, very robotic. It was too much information. A lot of it wasn't even asked for, but they started going through this list. So you really have to practice. Yeah, I have this information, but I have to understand and prioritize what it is that I need to talk about. Okay, hopefully that helps. Are there other follow-up questions? That's a good one. Both good ones.
Nope, sir. Keep going.
Okay. Let's see here. I think that's everything. Okay, so we're going to move on to what to wear. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. You can Google this and find a lot of stuff. But I do want to point out a couple things. I mean, being professional, right, and projecting an image of professionalism is very important in this day and age of business casual. Okay, you might not necessarily need to wear a tie. Okay, but a coat, that's fine. And I think that's acceptable. That shows I'm taking this seriously. And you know what? I made sure it all fits. My shirt's pressed. I don't have, if assuming again you're going into an actual interview live, not too much cologne, not too much perfume. Everything looks good. I comb my hair, I shaved, and my nails aren't like 3 inches long. Okay, so the basic grooming things. But as far as the dress and the professionalism, keep it simple to business conservative clothes. I've always been taught a dark charcoal gray, navy blue, nothing fancy out there with the bright yellows or polka dots or too many stripes. I've even been trained to not even have use black because, but I think that's more acceptable now. That's more now become, I think, my personal preference. But anything that's projects that image for the women, I think one of the things that I still hear is very big. If you do wear a business suit, the skirt, at least keep it knee length, nothing shorter than that. I remember a chief network officer that I knew and supported. She was very big on that. So you got to make sure you got everything is fitting properly as well. Okay. Here's just an example of things that is not recommended you do wear. Okay. So on the left, that is business casual, acceptable. On the right, you want to tuck in your shirt. Okay, you want to make sure things are ironed and things fit. And I think for the women, and you can certainly read more after you Google it, you don't want to look like the quote unquote soccer mom going out for the weekend with a family. You do want to show that you fit in with the company, and you can certainly do research to show what those people wear in that company. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about interview location. Interview location, I usually will pause here and ask for funny stories, but in the interest of time, let me just say that interview location is extremely important. And it's not just pulling up your Google Maps and your Waze to get to the right building. Okay, that's certainly one thing. What I would say is it's important to also look at the time of day when you are interviewing. And what do I mean by that? You might be flying into a different state in a totally different town, okay? But if you have the opportunity, even here in Kansas City, to check out even something like the traffic patterns in the morning, when you know you're going to be interviewing, it's well worth it. And here's why I mention that. This actually happened to me when I interviewed with General Electric and their medical division in Wisconsin. I got there the night before, and so I had, or at the afternoon of the day before, and I knew my interview was going to be around lunchtime, so I drove over there, and the traffic pattern actually changed, and it would have actually added more time. So yeah, I added 10, 15 minutes to make sure I'm coming in from a different direction. And in the parking lot, I made sure that I understood where the guest parking was, and then also took a peek and see if do I have to get badged in, or is there a security desk that can take visitors like me? All very important, right? It might seem like common sense, but in the heat of it, you might not think of those things. Here's one for if you're on for a position in your own company, and this happened to me as well. I thought applying for this job, piece of cake, I got a badge. I didn't know that where the interview was actually in a secure area. So my badge didn't actually work through there. And luckily, I was prepared, and the interviewer and their administrative assistant, I had their number, called them, and they let me in. So Murphy's Law will always show up, right? So you just got to make sure you're one step ahead of Murphy. Questions? Give it 10 seconds.
Yeah, we had a great one here. When interviewers ask, "Tell me about yourself," what do they really want to know?
So good question. I'm going to table that once we get to the interview questions, because I believe I have it in there. If I took it out, I'll make sure we cover that question there. Other questions?
Nope, you're good to go.
Okay. And then one last part as part of the location. Let's say you get to that interview location, the door is closed, it's your time for the interview at 11. Again, doors closed, and you're sitting there. What would you do? Let's take 10 seconds to answer that one. This one actually pops up fairly often, so I left it in as a question. What would you do? Any takers?
We have one person who said they would panic. We have another who, no, we'll take a moment for that one. Ease up, we're good. So we have wait a reasonable amount of time. We have knock.
Aha, these are good ones.
We have one more here. Ask admin for help.
Okay.
Showing proactiveness, but not intrusion.
Yeah, these are all great, right? And this has actually happened. I think it's happened to everybody, right? And so the best thing that you can do, because you don't want to be late. I mean, the proper thing that is, I think everybody, all hiring managers that can appreciate, they get behind. I know I certainly have, and it's like trying to contact or text people like, oh, I'm running 5-10 minutes behind. And you might not know that. So the best thing you can do is you get there, go ahead and knock. If there's a door there, go ahead and knock, or if there's somebody there that is your escort, to let them know. Can you let the hiring manager know that I'm here for the interview? But certainly if there's nobody else around, go ahead and knock. And that way, typically what will happen, they'll open the door and they'll say, yeah, hey, listen, thanks for being here. You're on time. I just need 5 more minutes. So that's a little trigger for them that your time is valuable. You're waiting. You're here when you're supposed to be, and then typically they'll give you time on the back end. So that's the more accepted way, is to be proactive, which is what some of you said, and let the interviewer know that you are there. Okay, so good. I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. All right, what to prepare for? Couple things here. Yourself and your value. A very simple bullet, but this is what keeps my side business afloat. I mean, and engaged through all these years. Yourself and your value. And what does that mean? This is an opportunity for you as a job seeker to know yourself in depth and to be able to sell yourself. This is your preparation to not tell people, here's what I've done over all these years, and it does have to be well thought out and organized, but more importantly, your value. How have you earned your seat at the table in whatever company? How have you earned the right to have your badge access working all those years, all those months? Okay, what are the things that you've done to justify that promotion, that award, that accolade, that whatever, right? You have to be able to articulate objectively your value and what you've done in the past, and certainly in the job you're applying for. Absolutely imperative that you do that. Okay. Other things to prepare for: the company, position, and the interviewer. So we talked about asking the right questions. So yeah, you research away, see what's going on in their company in the news. The position, yeah, I'll use mine as an example. What you might be used to as a project program manager might be different in your industry than in the telecommunications industry. So you have to understand and research what that position is about as much as possible. You can certainly ask in the question in the interview, but you should also try to do your research to give yourself a clear picture as you're walking into the interview. And last but not least, the interviewer. I mean, how many people out there actually do a little scouting on the interviewer? I think a lot more. It's so easy to do that on LinkedIn, and you should be doing that on LinkedIn. You should also leverage your network. I've had people contact me and say, Efren, I see you're connected to somebody, Joe, and I'm interviewing with Joe. Any thoughts on what I could be prepared for? I had somebody even say, you're connected to somebody that's connected to Susie, and I didn't know Susie, but the contact is, can I reach out to that person to ask about Susie? And I thought that was brilliant. I mean, why not? Right? Try to get a little insight. And so what can you do with that? Things that I found out from about my interviewer. One is, I found out one time one executive that I was interviewing with only liked a single page resume. So what I do, I brought a single page resume. I had the multi-page resume ready to go if needed. Okay, one guy is a military guy. He went to Northwestern, military officer, got out, was going through the interview process with me. He had found out his interviewing. I think there were two. They were Northwestern graduates. He printed out all his resumes on Northwestern colors. I mean, brilliant, right? But there's ways to give yourself that little bit of a nudge. Okay, so it's very important too. And just one data point for you: when I interviewed for my last position last month, one candidate got it, had over 150 applicants. So you need to really think about ways to differentiate yourself and to give yourself that little bit of an edge. Okay. We talked about leveraging your network if they have insight on any of the above. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah. And then practice. Practice multiple situations. I don't necessarily think practicing in front of a mirror is the best, because you're never going to be that critical looking at giving yourself advice. I think going with somebody, a friend, a loved one that can give you honest advice and call it like it is best. I think you do it with groups. I've seen that work well. I've seen people do it in job groups, church groups, others that are looking for a position. You have to practice it. And even having multiple people in a room, you have to practice for a scenario like this when there's more than one interviewer. So I'll tell you one example that I did not do well. It's one of my first interviews coming out of the military. I was actually in an interview as a power company based out of the Midwest, further west. But it was a two-on-one interview. In that 30-minute interview, they didn't let me talk once. They talked the entire time. And I did not get to talk about my background, what I bring to the table, any of that. And I realized afterwards why they did that. And I just hadn't practiced. And they did that because they needed somebody to work for the company that can actually be assertive enough to say, hey, Mr. or Miss Interview, that's actually really good. But let me tell you, what your example there, here's how I actually did that in my past job. All right, being able to be assertive, not aggressive, but assertive enough to articulate why you're a candidate for the job. So anyway, I know I won't make that mistake again, but you got to practice for stuff like that. Okay. let's go to important considerations. So there are a few. We talked about the nonverbal aspects. We talked about the handshake. One of the things I like to call out here, I've worked with a lot of awesome women in corporate America. One common theme that I've seen, especially with the hiring managers and certainly the execs, if you give them some kind of limp wristed, weak handshake that you would be giving differently to a man, right? And I've seen this, right? They think, oh, what, I can't handle a handshake, and they go up there and they extend their hand to this woman, and they just do this really lame 3-finger handshake. That's such a turnoff. It's just disrespectful. So things as simple as that, knowing a good handshake. My father worked for Pfizer, and he had always told me, a handshake is a great first impression, but you got to practice it. You're not there to crush the person's hand, but you got to make sure you mean it. You look them in the eye, and you're expressing your interest of being here in the moment with them for this interview. Okay. Let me see if there's other nonverbals. Oh, some very easy ones. Some people like to chew gum. Seen that in the interviews. Some people like to have the pen in their hand. They're clicking the pen away, right? They're slouching. They're fidgeting. I've had people spinning their chair almost 180 degrees, things that you won't necessarily know you're doing because you don't interview a whole lot, right? So these are things, again, to practice. Easy stuff, keep your phone off, right? You don't want that ringing in the middle of an interview. Let's see, other things here. High energy, we talked about wanting and showing that you want the job, why you're excited to be there. You don't want to be on too much of a caffeine high, but if you think you're tired after a work day, or you need some energy, do what you need to show your true colors and your energy for the job. Okay. Let me pause there. We'll take 10 seconds. Any questions other than the one about tell me about yourself, which is coming up?
No, we've got a couple saved up for
Okay.
as we get deeper into the interview itself.
Okay. Okay. All right, then we'll keep going here, and we are on track here. Okay, so some of the verbal aspects that we want to make sure you pay attention to. So absolutely listen to the question at hand. We'll talk about behavioral questions here at the end of the presentation, or towards the end of the presentation, but those are often multifaceted, and there's multiple aspects to that. So you have to make sure you're paying attention to what was asked, okay? You want to make sure you're using sufficient inflection. You don't want to be Ben Stein, Ferris Bueller, really mundane. Really show that energy. Vulgar language, not a good thing. I remember coming out of the military, it's almost seemed like a second language, and colorful adjectives that became part of the vernacular. You don't want to do that, and that takes practice. I know people in corporate America that certainly do that. So watch the vulgar language, project that professionalism in what you say. Watch the acronyms. Telecommunications, notorious for acronyms, death by acronyms. Not everybody is going to know what the acronyms mean, so practice making sure you're conveying your points and your background without losing somebody because of an acronym, okay? And then last but not least, watch the time of your response, okay? So now we're going to go into the actual interview. We're not going to obviously cover all of them. We're going to hit some of the main ones. And the ones that we'll cover here is to help you understand and read between the lines, okay? So before we do, one of the things I want to bring your attention to is the use of buzzwords. Right. A lot of people feel like using buzzwords, especially in their resumes and certainly in the interview or even in LinkedIn. Okay, they think this is the end all be all. This is the way to the path to a job, right? And it really isn't. Okay, buzzwords are usually blah. You use them because you've heard of them, and you think it sounds cool for that. Where I read it, I'm going to use it for my resume, or I'm going to use it in my interview, and that could be farthest from the truth, because buzzwords are probably used by more people than you could care to count. And when you use it, you just make yourself sound like everybody else. So bottom line is, treat buzzwords as, I think, useful adjectives, but don't just use buzzwords by themselves and alone. You have to be able to articulate why, objectively, the proof behind some of those buzzwords that you used, okay? This list is, and I haven't seen the 2019 one. I don't know if they stopped or what, or they usually put it out much later. But their LinkedIn comes up with a list of the most overused buzzwords out of all their users. And we're talking 650 plus million people. They go through and pull out the list and see which are the most common words people use in their profile. And it's important because this is often what people use in their resumes. And when they're in an interview, when somebody says, tell me about yourself or tell me your strengths, this is the list that most often comes out. And again, it's not ideal because you don't separate yourself from the 650 million people that also use this. You have to go into more detail of why you're specialized, what proof that you have experience or that leadership or where you're an expert. Okay, you have to understand that and be able to convey that objectively. And here's the list from 2017. A lot of the same words. Okay, if this is you and you're seeing this list and you're like, oh my gosh, that just sums up my whole approach to interviewing and my resume, I suggest you consider retooling things a little bit and adding more objective data to show the proof behind these terms. Okay, any questions on buzzwords?
Not that I've received so far.
Okay. All right, so this is something that I've learned over the years from the military, even into my current corporate job. You know, if you're not sure the best way to answer questions in an interview, think of it as the situation, action, result format, or the STAR format: situation, task, action, result. If you can frame your responses thinking, okay, what is the situation that I encountered? So for example, if you get asked the question, what's the most challenging thing you've ever accomplished at work? Well, let me think. Okay, let me talk. My answer is going to revolve around. Okay, this is the situation. It was a project that came to us from the CEO, and he wanted it done within a week. Okay, so now you're setting it up. Okay, so what action is about what steps that you took next. Okay, so in this case, okay, the CEO gave this directive. I formed a team of 20 people that I knew were subject matter experts. I understood and asked them what roadblocks they have to hitting the goal and the target at the end of the week, documented it. We helped escalate to make sure that all those roadblocks can be mitigated and solved. And then the result was we were able to attain the goal that the CEO wanted by the end of the week. So it's multiple phases, right? And you have to be very crisp, very clear on what those are, so that at the end of it, the hiring person, the hiring executive, the hiring manager clearly understands that it was tough, but you did it. You produced. And that's the value of keeping things in the STAR format. Okay. There we go. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? So to recap and to get regrounded on this, Dylan, can you go ahead and restate the question just to make sure I get all the facets on this question addressed?
Yeah, perfect. So it was, if I scroll back on through here, when interviewers ask, tell me about yourself, what do they really want to know?
Yeah. Is that it? Or is there more?
Yes, sir, that's it.
Okay. And, you know, that's an excellent question because most interviewers will ask that question. And I obviously can't represent what every interviewer wants. But what I will tell you, polling multiple people and getting understanding how recruiters train people on how to answer this is one. First and foremost, this is not a long answer. This is not something you're spending more than 60 seconds on or even 30 seconds on. All right. I asked this at my last job interviews, and somebody went on for 10 minutes on it. So what do you talk about? This is a good way to really hook the interviewer on something that perhaps you didn't or they won't necessarily see in the resume, because you might have the 2, maybe even a 3-page resume, right? And there's something special you want to call out right away, like is your tagline right off the bat. Okay, and so that's different for everybody. I'll just tell you, when I was asked that question back when I was interviewing coming out of the military, what was important to me was to set aside, and I probably did this because this is what I was trained to do, is I spent those 30 seconds articulating the differentiators about me compared to the other officers that were interviewing. And that was one. I worked on a ship for 5.5 years that operated with 25% less people and 25% less staffing, but was still expected to do 100% of the operational tempo that all the other ships did. So I wanted to convey that I know how to do more with less. So that worked its way in 30 seconds. I also, at the time, remember sharing how I was actually selected to go back and teach leadership back at the Naval Academy, which was at the time very highly selective shore tour. And I knew that that was something that I could actually put into play in corporate America, having not just the leadership background from the military, but now actually the academic side. And I knew nobody there that was interviewing with me or against me had that. So net, you have to think about what makes you very different, or what you think is going to make you very different than other candidates that might apply. More recently, and I've worked with a couple of former telecom or current telecom people, and this could apply to some of you. Maybe you're working for a Fortune 500 company. That's huge, right? Not everybody in Kansas City, I'm assuming this market, and this is where people are applying, have Fortune 500 experience, okay? Or have B2B experience, business to business, or have social media experience. Whatever that is, this is part of you coming up with your list of why am I good, okay? And this is what I think you can build into the first 30 seconds to 1 minute, in which will springboard into the other questions where the interview will always ask about your strengths, your weaknesses, your accomplishments, those kind of things. The other stuff will come into play. So do not feel like you need to build it all in this question. Let me pause and we'll take 15 seconds to see if there's any questions.
No questions so far. Just wanted to say real quick, if anybody has a follow-up to their question or needs any elaboration from Efren, go ahead and throw those in the chat as well. All right, thank you.
Yeah, yep. 5 more seconds. Anything coming in?
Oh, just under the wire here. Okay, so
Okay.
Carolyn asks, what are good questions to ask the interviewer? I think you will be touching on that shortly.
Yes. Well, let's table that one. Well, actually, maybe I took that one out. Tell you what, we'll go ahead and answer that one here. So good questions to ask the interviewer. Again, you want to avoid anything about me, right? Okay, but this question is now directed to the interviewer. I think what's fair is to ask about their background if you haven't already researched it, or even if you have, say, hey, Joe, I've seen you've been with T-Mobile for 15 years. You tell me a little bit about the things that you've liked about being in the company, some of the challenges. I know that there's a merger with Sprint coming. What concerns do you have? But this is good, right? This certainly impacts you, but this is something that interviewer can directly answer. I think another fair thing to put you into the role is to say, okay, I know you're the hiring manager. Tell me what success looks like for this candidate at the 30-day point. How about the 3-month point? How about the 6-month point? Or in general, whatever that is. So now you're trying to understand what the expectations of the job are, what that hiring manager feels, and will expect. This will also get you thinking like, okay, now I know I need to pull out this piece of information so I can weave it in to address what he just or she just said. All right, so this is this constant game of really seeking to understand when you can, and while they're telling you, you're coming up with maybe better answers. Does that help?
Yep, no follow-ups to that. We did have a separate question, which I'll go ahead and
Okay.
bring up here.
Yep.
Should responses to interview questions be separate from what's already on your resume?
How so? If that person can elaborate, how do you see your responses being separate than what's on your resume?
I'll be checking.
I think I know.
Okay. And if we want to give Daniel another 15 seconds, I can put in a plug here that would otherwise go later. So
Okay.
if everybody here is maybe you're viewing a JCL Career in Finance presentation for the first time, or maybe you're looking for other past presentations that we have done, that we've recorded with Efren and other speakers, visit easiest way to get there, youtube.com/Joco Library. You'll see a bunch of library videos, as well as some a career and finance channel that's purely dedicated to our past recorded presentations. Okay, and here we
Nice.
do have a follow-up from that
Yep.
question here. So is it okay to answer questions with inputs already spelled out on the resume, or do you have to come up with something new that they haven't read already? And we have one other question after that.
Yeah, I think both. So if you've already articulated in the interview one point about, let's say, the success of a job in a job, and if the question becomes, tell me about the result and why it was a good result, I would say you start with what's in the resume. I mean, that goes along with the approach, and as it should be, that what's in your resume is submitted to sell you. So look at it this way: what got you there is probably your resume, right? Part of it might be your network, but a good part of it is also what's in the resume. So to leave that out without purposefully articulating some of those big points that got you in there, I think is not the best approach. Okay, now you might be asked for another success and you've already used it on previous question. Now you can start using other examples, right? But certainly revolve around the things that got you into that interview. And whether it's the tell me about yourself or others, there's nothing wrong with peppering other parts in there that might not be listed, but are very noteworthy and are at a level that's worth mentioning, or stuff that might be on the second or third page that the hiring manager might not even get to. So there's a little bit of a recognition where, like, boy, they're not asking me about my work back at the help desk, and I know we're mentally here, we probably got another 15 minutes. So you might want to bring that part out to show that you're multifaceted. So it's part of that on staying on your toes and adjusting what's coming out and what you're articulating the most effectively. Other question?
Excellent. And that just real quick, the participant here who asked that question said that was very helpful, and thanks you.
Okay.
The next question here, when trying to find interviewer information through LinkedIn, does it look bad when he or she finds out? Go ahead.
I love it. To me, I get a lot of LinkedIn requests and views. As a matter of fact, that's always a bit of a measure of success for me, because my goal is to try to get people to view my profile out of 650, 700 million people. Where's it 800 now? Whatever, right? So for an interviewee, it's funny. Every intern that I interviewed visited my page, and those that were hiring for me visited my page. I expect that. Why would you? If anything, you don't know if they're going to be threatened by that or not. What I will say is that there's probably a greater don't psych yourself out. There's a greater likelihood that they would appreciate that you're taking this seriously, you're doing your due diligence and your research, just like they are trying to do with you. So personally, I think it's good. I would be more concerned that they didn't care. They need to be asking that kind of stuff, or researching that kind of stuff. Other questions?
Nope. Nope. If you excuse me, I'm just going to go visit your LinkedIn profile real quick. So keep on keeping on, Efren.
Awesome. Thanks, Dylan. All right, next question. Greatest strengths. Okay, there are different ways to get to this question, right? But when you answer, you have to make sure it's relevant and meaningful to the job. Okay, things like self-motivated, showing initiative. You want to show that you have the ability to work with a team. Maybe pepper in there, you will keep working those long hours until the job is done. Sure, those are good, a little bit canned, but you also want to make sure you maybe tie it to a job or something in a project that you listed in your resume, and that will reinforce that point. Okay, so you don't want to always come up with the stock descriptors that say, yeah, I'm a hard working. What are your greatest strengths? I'm a hard worker. I'm detail oriented. I'm a born leader. I'm friendly. You know what? No. I mean, how many of you would actually say, hey, I could take a phone call and take a message and give it to the recipient? No. There's certain things that every job seeker is expected to be able to do in this day and age. All right. So don't say your greatest strength is Microsoft Office. I see that more often than not. Okay. And it's not a good strength unless you're teaching it, you have a certification. If your level of knowledge is just like everybody else, all you did was just show your average, like how other people use it. So make sure you don't default to some stuff that, again, everybody else can do. And I see that. I mean, I've seen resumes where people say that one of their strengths is Office 2010, Office 2013. You guys know what version we're on right now? I mean, it's Office 365, and even 19 is still in use. Okay, so don't use antiquated stuff as also your greatest strengths. I sometimes see this in the technical side or with past advertising approaches that maybe don't use social media. You want to make sure you're forward thinking when you're showcasing what your greatest strengths are. Okay, I think it's also very important to focus on the hard skills versus soft skills. You heard me talk about things like team-oriented, people-oriented, good communicator, that kind of things. Those are very soft skills, and they're also very subjective. It's hard to prove those things. So I tell people, and I do this with the resumes, focus more on the hard skills. So what are some examples and things that I've used in resumes I've created? Project management, technical writing, requirements gathering, sales, business-to-business sales, curriculum development, publishing, fundraising, board of directors, whatever. Things that you can probably even do a job search and you'll find actual jobs with that. I mean, if you put in a job search for good communicator, you're not necessarily going to have a job that pops up, right? So pick something more concrete is my point. And then, of course, be prepared to provide supporting facts from the resume and certainly in your toolkit of data that you're bringing to the table. Greatest accomplishment, very similar. You want to think quality versus quantity, things that make you unique, right? So something I see very familiar. I think I had one real estate agent, and they all sell houses, right? And this person actually did it very well. But what made her very unique was that she had the highest number of, let me think about this correctly, highest number of sales in the, I think it was the 1 million plus housing side of that company. So something very important to call out, right? So think about the quality of what you're articulating versus just multiple things. It's more impactful if you can come up with something that says, yeah, I'm unique in this way and I'm good at it. Okay. Certainly want to make sure the examples you're articulating are for the job you're interviewing for. As an example, my last job was for project management. And if people are telling me about all the great work they did in the finance side, and they don't really talk about what drives project management, scope, schedule, cost, makes me question whether or not they have it. So you have to make sure you're going in there and you're able to give examples specific to the job that you're going for. In a management position, think about how you've led a team to success, how you deal with conflict, how you lead a team to a successful outcome and break down barriers. So a little different approach if you're asked this question and you're in a management position. Always talk specifics, like I talked about, making it objective. How do you do that? Talk dollars. You talk percentages. It's one thing for me to say I've delivered all my projects 100%. I've delivered all my projects successfully versus I've delivered all projects 100% 2 weeks ahead of schedule, just like in the quiz up above. So you want to be as objective as possible using actual numbers where you can, or even awards, because nobody can take away those awards. If you got recognized with salesperson of the quarter, salesperson of the year, whatever, okay? And again, be prepared to provide supporting facts. All right. Weaknesses. This is a tough one. I ask this a different way when I interview people. And it sometimes freaks out the college people, college age candidates. And I'll ask it from not what are your weaknesses. I said, tell me about a time you failed. And nobody really wants to admit that. So just keep in mind that nobody expects you to be perfect. And to say that you are, that's that's almost a showstopper, because everybody has an opportunity to improve, and everybody needs to show how they've learned how to improve from maybe a past opportunity, job, project, assignment where it wasn't great, but how you learned to make it better. That's really the most important thing here. Do not leave this question in a state of failure. All right. You want to show that you can make yourself better, you can make the team better, that you have the potential to grow. I think that's a very important thing any hiring manager, any company wants in somebody. As we learn to fight through a project, deliver very tough things, you want to show you can be successful and learn. Okay. Let me pause there 10 seconds. Any questions?
We have one that we might address a little bit down the road, but I'll go ahead and throw it out there so you can have it in the back of your mind, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So what advice do you have for people with a criminal record? When should they disclose this information, and how much should they share? Go ahead.
That's a tough one. I can't even remember the last time I was asked that. And you know what? Here's the way I would answer that. Um, I would, unless asked in a first interview, um, you can save that, making sure that goes to something you can confide in to the actual hiring manager. All right. Versus, I would say even HR should do their screening, and if you get to the hiring manager, I think bringing it up to the hiring manager is actually a good sign of transparency, because what you don't want is you go through this whole process of 2, 3 interviews, and then you merge down the path and you turn out really is a top candidate, and then you drop that bomb on them, right? And then I think that has more of a potential to come back negatively. I would just say, listen, I just be honest with you. Here's something from my past I want you to know, but it's kind of like the weakness. But here's how I've moved past that. All right, what I've done since, why I'm here today, why I'm interested in this position, and why I think I can help you and the organization out. You can't hide from it. That's probably one of the worst things, right? People are going to find out if they do a background check. Hit it head on. Take the matter into your own hands. Control the information, and if anything, you get a chance to articulate it based on what you want them to hear, not just what they research. Does that help?
I think that's great. Another word that I've heard is highlighting work done while incarcerated. If that's the case, it is still history.
Absolutely. You know what? If people get their degree, they stay productive. That's what you want to articulate, and what you'd be remiss to not, right? Um, Always try to articulate the positives and the things that show that, you know what, there might have been something from the past, whether or not it was a project that gone wrong, or it's something with the law. But you moved forward, you've made yourself a better person, and I think people will always cheer for that underdog and can appreciate that level of honesty. So.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so how do you handle conflict? So I ask this a lot, right? And especially in the roles that we hire for, we're going to have conflict. We're responsible for launching things that not everybody's going to find popular, or is competing against their priorities. Or sometimes we tell people no. That's in a lot of jobs, right? So this is asked to see how you perform when the going gets tough. How do you deal with people? And more importantly, how have you led the team past that? How have you led yourself and the initiative or whatever to a successful end? You do it just like with the weakness. You don't want to leave this in a state of conflict. Nobody's expecting you to be the Pope, right? But you should try to articulate how you were able to get a team to maybe agree, people that you are working with to move past it. They don't have to go be drinking buddies, but you were able to get the job done. I think I asked this of every intern that I had. So any questions there? Take 5 seconds. And I've already covered this one, so we might have a little more time here. Same thing, weakness, failure. We've all failed at something. Don't leave in a state of failure. Any questions?
No, sir. Keep on going.
Okay. Why do you want to change jobs? So it's a very fair question. People are going to ask that, and nothing to be defensive about, nothing to hide behind, right? I think it's good to be honest, to be able to tell the hiring manager, well, based on the research of the company and what I know this team does, and what I've seen um, this role do in the company. I think that's a great natural fit for what I want to do next in my career. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with articulating that you want to grow. You even want a change, but it's not such a big change and such a big leap that you can't add any value, right? You can't be like, hey, for the last 10 years I've been in telecom, and now I just like to go be a doctor. I'm going to go apply for that. It just doesn't work, right? So there has to still be some level of, I want to change jobs because not only do I want to better myself, but I also see that my past experiences can help this team, this company, etc. All right, and just make sure, again, you don't disparage your past employer in any way, but you want to portray yourself as very vital to what that team is trying to hire for, right? Type of salary. I'll be honest, that CEO that I know here in Overland Park, I often refer to him. This is a tough question. The guidelines I will say when this comes up in an interview, and I've certainly asked it, do some research on what that market you're in pays, what that role and level pays, and put yourself right in the middle of that. You don't want to rule yourself out of the salary on the first interview. Your job in the first interview is to get to the second interview and the third interview. So put yourself in the middle, because really what happens is if you go through the process and you end up being a strong candidate and you work towards the end, it's, I don't want to overgeneralize it, but typically it's going to be a drop in the bucket for that $10,000, that $5,000 to get the right candidate for most companies. So it's save the negotiation for the later time. And then really when you do factor in all the benefits that they give, certainly the medical, the dental, even one thing that's huge for telecom, Sprint did it, T-Mobile does it, free phone service is not cheap, right? Either discounted, but so you got to weigh everything in total. Don't just get fixated on the salary, right? Here's a question. How many ping pong balls would you fill a swimming pool? If you were going to be an animal in a merry-go-round, what would you be? Or sell me this pen. I've seen and heard all of these. Somebody had asked me one time in one interview, was a photo circuit board manufacturer. They had asked me, draw me the lube oil system of a gas turbine engine. And it was a fair question because it was in my resume at the time coming out of the Navy. So the point in this and showing this is that tricky questions are going to be out there, and they don't expect you to know the right answer, but they want to see how you handle pressure. How do you handle tough questions like this? How creative are you, right? If you can come up and say, well, here's what I know. Ping pong ball is about 1.5 inches in diameter. I think a Olympic-sized swimming pool is about this to this, and doing a little math here. They just want to see how you get to that answer and that guess. They certainly aren't going to know it. So take your time. Don't panic. Try to gather some facts and assumptions that you think you can be comfortable with. Walk them through how you're coming to your deduction and your answer, and then go from there. I think that's the best approach. Show your ability to be creative. All right. And don't stress again about not knowing the right answer. If you think these kind of questions are rare, take a look at this. I'll let you look at this. These are the questions that companies that you recognize ask. Amazon, Zappos, Yahoo. A bit older. I'm not exactly sure if they still ask it, but these were definitely attributed to them. So be prepared for those. Big thing again, don't panic. Think about it with a little bit of methodology, and then give your best guess. They want to see how you handle that pressure and that last minute creativity. Okay. Supervisory themes, and we're wrapping up here. I mentioned this a couple slides ago. So if you're applying for a supervisor position, you want to show more about how you can handle in the us versus the me. And so what does that mean? You want to show how you can lead a team, how you handle conflict within a team, how you got to the result with the team versus painting a picture of that you're a very good individual contributor that hasn't managed a team. You want to, it is totally fair for somebody that's never managed people to go apply to be a management position. Everybody's been in that, every manager's been in that position, but it's to showcase how you've done it in the past, even if you didn't have direct reports, how you've matrix managed people successfully, which is admittedly harder than managing people who report directly to you. So you have to make those connections. Okay, and there's certain themes here on how you can position your responses. Okay, and last but not least here, make sure it's in that situation action result. Okay, we talked a little bit about behavioral questions. You will see a lot of these. Here's an example of one. These are multifaceted, but they often see how you actually did this work. Okay, how you actually the end result of the actual problem. The bottom line is when you get a behavioral question, you don't want to say, well, I think I would do it this way, or I suppose. No, you want to showcase something and talk about something that you specifically done. The best predictor of future performance is past performance. So you want to give them something concrete to show that, yeah, she has been there, done that in the past, and we can expect they'll do that again in the future. Okay? And then I know somebody had asked about the questions. We talked a little bit about them. I suggest you have 5 to 10 at the ready because the interviewer might actually answer some of them. And the worst thing you can do is go into an interview and then when they say, what questions can I answer for you? You're like, nope, I'm good. Not good. So you want to have enough handy that you can ask at any time. And the best way to close the interview, sir, is to don't be too gimmicky. Firm handshake, restate your selling points. Again, here's why I'm here. I want this because this job, this company excites me. My background in telecommunications, especially in 5G technology, lends very directly to what I know this team is working on based on what you're telling me. I know I can add value to the team and blah, 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 blah. So you want to close it showing why you're the best candidate, okay? And then telephone interviews, same approach with what we had talked about for the Zoom. Actually, nothing different. It's basically the same. Okay. We talked about thank you letters and sending it. And then I think that's everything. So I'll let in the last couple minutes here, if you have other questions, you can type them in the screen. The last slides here are really just to give you an idea of what I go through when I work with my clients on their interviewing. And it's long. It's 2 to 3 hours long. And we put people through every scenario, right? And then you get live feedback. And it's it's definitely tiring. Let's put it that way. But it's time well spent. And certainly you can do this if you get the right group. Okay. So Dylan, turn it back over to you. This is just my information, and you can consider it. If you need help with your resume, you can certainly give me a call. We can chat about it. The only one in the area that I know that has a don't like it, don't pay for it guarantee with the resumes. But I will say this, I am 100%, I've been paid 100% of the time. So I stand behind my product that much that I can actually offer that. So Dylan, any questions?
None that I've received. I tried to solicit some off-the-wall interview questions, but didn't have any takers.
Okay.
I love that stuff. It's fantastic. So
Yeah.
thank you all for joining us this evening. And please chime in the chat. Just, how much you really appreciate Efren taking the time to share all this excellent information. And of course, as I get into my closing spiel here, we do get a question. So when
Good.
there's that Murphy's Law, right?
Yes.
So when asked, how would you, so quote unquote, how would you, instead of tell me about a time when, do you answer with a specific example or just a hypothetical?
Never. I definitely caution to not do a hypothetical. Always go with concrete. And again, the reason in any interview question, especially the behavioral, is you want to show how I've been there, done that, not how I might have been there and how I think I would do it. the best, again, predictor is how you've actually done certain things. All right. So this is why you have to have your personal inventory of examples for the interview, so you can articulate uh, those past instances and how you've demonstrated the what the interviewer is looking for in that line of questioning. I mean,
Fantastic.
you won't always have the absolute, but when you can, try to go for not the hypothetical, the actual.
Great. And we have a lot of thank yous coming through. So everybody really appreciates, again, you just taking the time. I know you were a very, very busy person. I just received another question here.
Okay.
So we'll try
No
to wrap
rush.
this up within the next 5. So
Sure.
when changing careers, do you recommend working with an agency?
There's nothing wrong with that as long as you don't have to pay. I think that's the biggest thing. I haven't found any benefit to paying a company to help you find a job. The best ones are going to say, listen, we get paid when you get paid. All right. And I know the ones I've worked with in years past were ones that the company paid for that fee. Right. Even the guy that the CEO of a local company, it's the company pays for that, not the candidate. So I don't recommend paying somebody for that help unless they are successful in placing you. Now, helping you with the interviews and the interviewing and the resume, that's a whole different matter. But if it's maybe part of what they offer, okay, that might be something to consider. But it shouldn't be like, hey, give us your resume and $500 and we'll get a job. And I think it should be contingent upon them getting you a job.
And my rates are much cheaper. I'll just throw that in.
There
No,
you
I'm
go.
kidding. And anybody else, if you have any burning questions, maybe something that comes into your mind as
Yeah.
soon as we, of course, close this session down, Efren's contact information is on that slide there. Feel free to take that down, even if it turns out you don't end up needing it. We did have one more question here, so we'll
Yeah.
cover
We
that
got time.
really quickly, and then we'll just go ahead and wrap things up. So
Yep.
when an employer asks for your salary, how can you avoid answering?
You shouldn't avoid answering. You should actually, matter of fact, you don't want to avoid. If they're asking you a question, doesn't matter what it is, avoiding is not in your best interest. So the salary one, yeah, it's tricky, but this is where you go to sites like Indeed or even Glassdoor, I think has it, right? You could certainly research through other websites what the going rate for that job title in that region, in that city is, right? And you'll get a range, and it could be this job pays between 50 and 60,000. Okay, that way going in the interview, if the hiring manager says, "What are you looking for?" 55. That's how you do that. You want to get yourself into that second interview. You don't want them to rule you out. And certainly if it's an HR person interviewing you, you don't want to say, well, you know what, that's got to be 100. And you're not going to see the second interview. You need to get to the subsequent interviews. So in the first interview, get yourself in the range. Once you get further down the process, then you can go into, you know what, I really like this opportunity. If you're the final candidate, you can certainly negotiate. That's a whole different skill and topic. Don't avoid it.
Right. Okay. So everyone, thank you for being here. Efren, thank you for the
Yes, thank you.
information. Our next career and finance program will take place at 2 p.m. Thursday, October 15th, so that's this coming Thursday. And that program will be focused on networking. Visit jocolibrary.org and click on the Career and Finance feature on the homepage to discover upcoming events, sign up for our monthly Career and Finance e-newsletter, or find additional career and finance resources. Also be sure to follow the library's Facebook page, facebook.com/jocolibrary, to receive notifications for additional live online Johnson County Library program for all ages. Thank you all so much and have a great evening.